There has been outrage on social media this morning, and I'd love to know what you think of this, because it's an event at which a drag artist, a drag queen, will read stories to children has sparked outrage on social media. Alicia Van Dell has been invited to Taunton Library next month as part of LGBTQ History Month. The performer will read from children's books that cover LGBT themes and challenge traditional fairy tales. Event organiser Ton Cannon said he was surprised at the criticism, as previous events had been warmly received, though critics of the event are making assertions on Twitter such as keep sexuality in the bedroom, not in libraries, and certainly not for preschool children. Where do you stand on this? What is wrong with a child meeting a drag queen? What is wrong with a child being told a story by a drag queen? And that's not a trick question. I genuinely, if you're a parent or a grandparent, I'd really like to know what your worry is about that. And on the flip side, if you're a parent that wouldn't have a problem with it whatsoever, maybe you can shed some light on why other people do. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Well, joining me live on the line to discuss this story and whether it's a good idea or not is the former government minister, former star of Celebrity Big Brother, Strictly Come Dancing, and, all-round bit of a national treasure now. Ann Widdecombe joins me live on the line. Morning to you.
Good morning to you. Happy New Year as well.
And to you. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me this morning. Why do you think people object to a drag queen reading a story to children?
I don't think it's just a question of a drag queen reading a story. After all, a whole load of people have taken children to pantomime, and they've seen pantomime dames who are, of course, men dressed as women, a lot of them not even realising that that is the case. So I don't think there's anything wrong with a drag queen reading a story, but of course this is being promoted as part of, LGBT week, challenging traditional fairy stories. Childhood, particularly early childhood, is a time of innocence. And also, I think parents should control the pace of revelation. They decide, taking into account the ability of every individual child to understand it, and they know that better than anybody else. They should be the ones who talk about these things to very young children, if they're going to be talked about at all.
But isn't there an assumption then that it's being in some way sexualised, when in actual fact, for instance, a drag queen talking to children wouldn't be on that kind of subject? The literature that would be in the schools that would be read to the children, it would be more relationship based. I've seen a lot of these sort of stories for kids, and it's kind of like the Handsome Prince and the Handsome Prince. Nobody's suggesting for one moment that there's going to be any detail about what the Handsome Prince and the Handsome Prince do together.
Exactly. Nobody's suggesting that, but nevertheless, families, the vast majority of families throughout the UK are mum, dad, and children. That is what young children take for granted. And if you're going to introduce these other issues, that's fine, as long as it's done by parents and at an age appropriate to a child. And what is appropriate for one child at 4 may not be appropriate for another child until 9. I mean, it varies considerably.
But that's the bit I don't...
That's all the objections are. Parents are saying, we don't want this thrust on children, particularly very young children. I mean, I think this is the key here. I don't think there'd be an uproar if they were 11-year-olds, but particularly very young children. Parents want to control that, and I'm all in favour of that.
I mean, you mentioned there, I guess, the speed of revelation. It should be down to the parents to decide when something is revealed to a child. But by merely stating that almost makes it sound like it's something that is forbidden or something that shouldn't be articulated to a child.
That may well not be anywhere within the range of their experience. And all parents know that when you're trying to teach children something that is different from the assumptions they're making, you have to do it in a proper way, and you have to take those decisions. And that, to my mind, is what parental responsibility is all about. In my day, there wasn't any sex education in schools. Parents did the job, and parents told their children at completely different ages.
But that
I know
would be...
when my mother told me the basic, what we used to call the facts of life, she said to me, you mustn't discuss this with other children because their mothers may not have told them.
But I don't understand how we've got onto sort of things being revealed and the facts of life, when in actual fact, all that is said to a child, and I guess this is the crux of the issue, what is wrong with saying to even a 4-year-old, this couple are a man and a woman, and this couple over here are 2 men, and that's it. That's as detailed as you need to be. What is wrong with that being explained to a child?
Because I don't think there is anything quite as simple as that. As I say, the overwhelming majority of children will be in households of mummy and daddy. That is what they take for granted.
Well, no, they might just be in a household of mummy on their own.
The rest must come gradually. That's all I can say. I'm standing up for parental responsibility. If you take a different view, that's fine. And the parents who send their children to these events will presumably have taken a different view from mine. That's fine. But I understand why an awful lot of parents don't want this for their children. And
Okay.
I'm on their side.
Well, at the moment, we're in a situation where homophobic hate crime is unfortunately on the rise. We've got nearly half of school pupils that were polled at the end of last year saying that their friends use discriminatory language around sexuality to each other. Teachers are responsible, this is according to Schools Week, for 1/10 of serious LGBT bullying within schools. If mentioning the existence of LGBT people to young children isn't a way to tackle those issues, what would you suggest would be a good idea to stop that?
First of all, I mean, I regard those statistics with a certain amount of healthy scepticism. I mean, when you're talking about homophobic hate crime, we have the ridiculous situation that people are accused of discrimination and homophobia when they've simply, and in one very famous case, refused to put a slogan on a cake. I've been accused of homophobia merely because I'm opposed to gay marriage. I know a lot of gays who are also opposed to gay marriage. But I'm accused of homophobia because I'm a straight who's opposed to it. So when I hear statistics like that, I don't immediately think, oh, what a terrible society we live in. And so I'm afraid I just don't see the need to start explaining things to 3 or 4-year-olds who, quite honestly, know a different world, and they need these things revealed gradually. And crucially, it is parental responsibility which should decide when these things are revealed.
I take that and I understand your opinion. As a gay man myself, Anne, and I have watched you on telly, I really loved you in the Celeb Big Brother house, the way that you interacted with all the other housemates and the way in which you and Amanda Barry and you and Shane as well, you all had very heated at times, but adult conversations about your differences. So I absolutely get where you're coming from, and I really wish that you weren't against gay marriage, and I'll tell you, I know you are, and I'll tell you why I wish that you weren't, and I'll tell you, perhaps I can help shed some light on why people perhaps accuse you of homophobia when you say that. And I guess it comes down to the fact that there is a perception, if you're against gay marriage, that you're against me having the same rights as someone who is straight. And I guess the next assumption that would be made after that is that that is as a result of homophobia. If you are denying 2 people equal rights, people are going to presume that there's some hatred in there. So
let me just ask you a very straight question.
Of course.
Why do some gays oppose gay marriage? Are they homophobic? I doubt it.
No, I don't know why some gays oppose gay marriage. I've not heard of that many that actually do, but if they do...
Hang on. I mean, for example, there's the openly gay journalist Andrew Pearce.
Yes.
Wrote in the Daily Mail against gay marriage. When Christopher Biggins was interviewed, he said marriage is between a man and a woman. These people are not homophobic. They have a view of traditional marriage and a view of the function of marriage which doesn't happen to match yours, but which does match mine.
Yes, I suppose as well, again, I don't know why someone else, like Andrew Pearce, or I know writes for a newspaper that obviously is Well, actually, I don't think the Mail were against gay marriage, but obviously I know a lot of their readership perhaps would have questioned it. I don't know why someone of that minority would want to deny the rights to themselves and others.
Talk to him about it.
Well, I would be quite happy to talk to them about that. But I guess
on your programme and talk to him about it.
Absolutely will. But I guess I just wanted to really find out from you, Anne, what it was about these particular things, whether it be gay marriage, whether it be drag queens, whether it be all these sorts of things. I guess I want to know what the fear is. Is the fear that it's going to make children have to grow up too quickly? Is the fear that it would be that children would perhaps learn things or ask questions that would be difficult? Is the fear really, and I would get this fear because it was one that my parents had, that actually by discussing these things at a young age, there's a danger that in some way that's going to make those children gay?
I don't know that it would make. I don't know that you've never been made gay.
No, I know. I think that's the fear. I'm not saying that that's a justified fear, but that's the fear.
I think the fear is very straightforwardly that they will start to become curious about things that most children should not until they're a bit older. I mean, it is really as straightforward as that. And as I say, we have completely different views on this. You, for example, say you don't understand why I oppose gay marriage. Well, straightforwardly, if you redefine marriage once, you can redefine it again. And if you can say the centuries-old tradition that marriage is no longer between a man and a woman, then why not say in future it can be between a man and two women? Why not legalise polygamy? Now, I'm not saying that's where we're going, but I'm just saying that those questions arise once you start on a redefinition of marriage. That was why I very strongly opposed any redefinition.
And has that...
But what I did not oppose, and this is crucial, what I did not oppose was giving rights to gay couples. And I said all along things like inheritance rights and next of kin and all the rest of it could be sorted out through individual law and didn't need actually to have marriage.
Yeah, of course, and I know that the principles of the civil partnership you were in favour of. Correct me if I'm wrong, because again, that gave...
I was against civil partnerships because I knew where they were going, but I was in favour of altering individual laws to meet concerns such as inheritance rights, next of kin, etc.
Now, since gay marriage has come in and there hasn't been that push for a redefinition of marriage towards the other more sinister directions that you were just telling us that you were concerned about, are you slightly more in favour of it now that you've seen that it hasn't led to other things?
Absolutely not. First of all, the fact that there hasn't already been a demand for further redefinition is proof of absolutely nothing at all. There simply hasn't been the time. Look at the time that elapsed between the introduction of civil partnerships and the introduction of gay marriage. There was actually a much longer period. So I don't actually take any comfort from that. But I also am a very firm believer that marriage is between a man and a woman. What people do in their private lives, none of my business, quite honestly. Absolutely none of my business. But when it comes to legal definitions, then that is my business.
I think to members of the gay community it is just really important. And I know that you're quite right. The law could give us on paper the same rights as heterosexual married couples. I know that it could be resolved that way. Many people felt that the civil partnership was resolution enough. To me, and I don't think we're going to agree on this, the word is really important. Having the word marriage and having my right to be able to access that is really important, was really important to me, because it just felt like I wasn't being denied a right that was being provided to others. And it really was that simple. Take what you're saying, and I understand, and I'm thrilled that there has been no movement towards polygamy. There has been no campaign for equality towards polygamy, and I understand that that was the concern of a lot of people, but the word and that actual equality was so important. And I think that's why. And I totally take what you say, Anne, that, we could have probably had it in name regarding individual legislation, but that word marriage was really important.
Well, I hear what you say, but marriage is really important to me too, and there is only one definition of marriage, which I acknowledge.
Sure, I don't feel like gay marriage takes away from straight marriage, though. Straight people aren't any less married as a result of gay people.
You realise that in law there is no longer a term husband and wife in law, because it couldn't be done once you had gay marriage. And the other thing I think about this is that, OK, you and I are having a perfectly reasonable discussion, but that isn't the case with an awful lot of people who daren't say what they think because they're afraid they might lose their jobs or whatever it might be. They have to be careful what they teach and all the rest of it. And I actually think there is a tremendous crush on at the moment of conscience, because the instant people like me say we don't believe in gay marriage, somebody says that's homophobic. And indeed, in one much reported case, an official in Trafford Housing who wrote on his private Facebook, in very moderate terms, that he did not support what was then the proposed introduction of gay marriage, actually was demoted with a 40% pay cut at work. Now, that is Soviet.
I understand that. I think that the fear is that, well, I'll tell you what this actually boils down to, and I think, again, this is where you and I perhaps don't get along, and actually ideologically you and I perhaps aren't dissimilar on certain issues, I have to say, but on this one where I think we differ is that I think a lot of people's concerns about gay marriage and gay equality, it comes from religion, and to me they are not on a par when it comes to protections. I don't think religion, for instance, should be covered in the way in which it is in the Equalities Act, because religion is a choice and sexuality isn't. And so therefore I can't see how they are compatible side by side, because you don't choose your sexuality in the same way you don't choose your hair colour, you don't choose your eye colour. They are just ingrained within you, whereas a religious belief is something that you decide on. So therefore, if your belief says that being gay is wrong, that is your decision to believe that. That's where I see the difference.
Yes, but it should also be possible for you to voice your decision and voice what you believe, because that is the very, very essence of free speech. But I'm interested, you've made a point there. You've said that you think that a lot of opposition to gay marriage it came from religious sources.
Yeah.
It's worth looking at what happened in France, where the opposition was almost 100% secular, and you had massive demonstrations by gays themselves saying, we all remember the great slogan, plus gay sans mariage, more gay without marriage. And it wasn't just, people who held to particular religious beliefs. Unfortunately, when it started in this country, the movement towards gay marriage, I made that point endlessly within the campaigns that I was part of, saying this mustn't be seen as religious. You've got to embrace all of society in this. They did in France. They didn't here. But it does make a nonsense of the claim that to be anti-gay marriage, you've got to be religious. You don't.
No, I don't believe you have to be religious to be anti-gay marriage, but I think a lot of the objections came from a lot of people's religious belief. But you are quite right, that's not absolutely everyone, and it was different in different places. Ann Widdecombe, real pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for being so candid this morning here on Talk Radio. So that's what Ann Widdecombe has to say about that. We kind of went off into gay marriage a little bit, but you get the principle of what she's saying. It is too soon, too young, and it is not the kind of thing that should be happening. Drag queens telling stories to children. What do you think? Because I still can't hear a reason why there's anything wrong with it. And if a child says, why is that man dressed as a woman? You say, oh, because sometimes he dresses as a woman. And every child I've met is about 20 times more sophisticated than I think people give them credit for. But perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps that I would be in terrible danger of scarring a child if I were to have one in my care as a result of my, completely cavalier attitude towards them being read a story by a drag queen.
I just think it's disgraceful. It detracts both from the story itself, and I think, as many of your callers have said, it is bringing sexuality and sex to little children who are far too young to understand it. I think the other important thing that you have to remember is that also drag queens are a very adult form of entertainment. It's a very, drag queens are men who dress up as a very sexualized and pastiche of a woman. And many women ourselves, we find them offensive because, they're just a caricature of womanhood, a very sexualized caricature. And there's absolutely no need for it. There's no need for children to be introduced to these, quite harmful stereotypes. I mean, we wouldn't be advocating that 4 and 5-year-olds watch Benny Hill or watch Carry On films, because they portray women in a very sexist and very sexually offensive manner. So why is it okay to bring another very highly sexualized stereotype or caricature into a library? And it's very, very contrived, actually. Most children, they go to library story time to hear stories, not to kind of be indoctrinated by this idea that, this is men can be women and when men can be, very highly sexualized women. It's just highly, highly inappropriate. And it's all to do with, pushing this agenda that, men can become women can become men, that, the concept of gender, gender being
what is the agenda? Let's say that you are absolutely correct and that there is this agenda you speak of. What is the agenda and why is it harmful, in your opinion?
Okay, so the agenda is the idea that, sex, as in biological sex, doesn't exist, that we're all gender fluid, that there's no such thing as male, that there's no such thing as female, and we're all one kind of amorphous mass, and men can be women and women can be men, and that, biological sex, whether you're a man or a woman, is something that is, we can choose and that we can change at will. Now, that is a very harmful idea to be promoting to children, certainly because it's not true. We're actually telling them something. We're telling them to believe something that isn't scientifically true. And secondly, when people do go through, gender transitions, as it's called, or, sex changes, sex reassignment surgery is the technically correct term. Actually, that is a very long and torturous process. It's a very difficult process. And that's for individuals who are, suffering with gender dysphoria, who, they find life so hard in their sort of biological sex that they want to take on the appearance and the mannerisms and the attributes of someone of the opposite sex. Now, that isn't something that actually we ought to be normalising, I think, to children. Yes, we can teach children that they need to have compassion and empathy, and, everybody's got dignity and respect, and that they need to treat everybody with, the human dignity and the rights, that they deserve. But that's a very different thing to actually normalising, sort of dressing up as the opposite sex in a very sexualised fashion. And there's just no need for it. And
what I'm troubled by with what you're saying, well, there's a lot of what you're saying that troubles me, but I guess the biggest thing is that you are continually equating the drag queen reading a story with it being in some way sexualized towards the children, that in some way it is going to be prurient, that in some way it's going to possibly, I guess, reference sexual activity, when in actual fact it really is just someone who performs as a drag performer. They're not going to be doing their evening act. They're not going to be talking about anything inappropriate. How is this different to parent taking a child to a pantomime where a man would be dressed as a woman and there would be a parody of a woman? There would be jokes that the adults can get that the children can't get. You surely don't see that as indoctrination, do you?
A pantomime is a very different form of entertainment. And the expectation is that, Widow Tranky will be a man dressed up as a woman, and this is very obvious.
Well, the expectation is a drag queen will be a man dressed as a woman as well. That's very obvious.
I think not necessarily, and I think actually, I think about my children. I've got 5 children, some of whom are still very young. They would be frightened by it. They would actually, because
your children would be frightened by a drag queen.
Because a lot, if you look at the costumes and the makeup that drag queens put on, very stylized, very heavy, very thick makeup. A lot, it's almost clown-like. I think a lot of children, actually would find that frightening. And the thing is, what is the point? There is.
Well, I guess the point. I'll answer that for you. I guess the point is that LGBT bullying in schools is on the rise. Hate crime against LGBT people is on the rise, and I guess that as part of LGBT History Month, the idea is that by the way, over half of primary school children actually as well state that negative homophobic language is used towards them. 10% of teachers actually use homophobic language towards students as well. So this is, I guess, a way of, if you expose to young children nothing more, and I am not in favour of anything more than the mere existence of different kinds of people, different kinds of people who might dress differently, different kinds of people, that men who might wear a dress, a woman who might dress in a more masculine way, two men who might be falling in love, two women who might have fallen in love. There's no need to go into the nitty-gritty details. All you need to do is just a child. If your child is scared and says, well, what's that, mummy? You say, oh, look, that's a man who dresses as a lady, just like in the pantomime we saw. Here you go, would you like a biscuit? I mean, I don't see why it needs to be more complicated than that when you consider the benefits of people hopefully not being subjected to homophobic bullying. People,
well,
go on.
I think the thing you have to remember is that, you know, drag queens are not something that you see normally walking down the street. It is a particularly specialised form of adult.
You don't see pantomime dames either.
But the thing is, you are not trying, when you go to a pantomime, you're not trying to normalise that to children. There is a reason why, you know, you just talked about sending drag queens into libraries because of homophobic bullying. Now, actually, all schools need to have a zero tolerance policy on bullying of whatever nature it is, of whatever nature. You know, and you don't need to have a drag queen reading a story to a 4 or 5 year old in order to have a zero tolerance policy on bullying, and in order to say to children, look, some children are very, you know, some people are very different to us. They differ in appearance, or they differ in the way their families are, and it's never okay to bully someone for being different. You don't need to have a drag queen. It's dressing up as a really,
because it's educating alongside everything else. I mean, if you're going to punish someone for bullying, you're quite right. You do need a zero tolerance approach. But what would be the problem with having both approaches? That you educate the children that different people exist. For instance, Caroline, my nieces and nephews, who are, you know, some of whom have been known from the age of 3, age of 4, that Uncle Cristo has Uncle Carl that he goes out with, whereas Auntie Sally has Uncle Joe that's her husband. Do you know what? They don't even flinch. They don't even notice. They don't even care. Now, we don't have to go into any kind of details about what actually happens. We don't try and indoctrinate in the way in which you're saying it. Children are completely fine about it, and I actually sometimes wonder if parents getting in such a tiz over this makes it more of an issue than it needs to be, and probably damages the children more.
No, absolutely not. I think you have to remember that parents are the first and foremost primary educators. You know, children learn everything from their parents, and that's why it's very important that we all model respectful and healthy attitudes. But the thing is that what this drag queen initiative is trying to do, it's actually trying to normalise and sexualise something to very young children. It's a great, you know.
It's not sexualising, Caroline. It's not sexualising.
Drag queens are a sexualised form of entertainment. They are a grotesque parody of womanhood. You know, women do not wear these big bouffant hairstyles and have huge.
But it's fancy. It's fancy dress. It's just fun. And for you to have compared it to sort of Benny Hill or anything like that. I mean, Benny Hill actually had topless women in there. The drag queen won't be stripping off. The drag queen won't be doing anything sexually inappropriate. It would literally just be a man with a funny wig on, wearing a dress, reading stories to children. How you can equate that to something being sexualized is beyond me.
But it's beyond me how you cannot see what and maybe this is because you're a male. It's beyond me that you cannot see that for many women, particularly feminists, that a drag queen just presents a very highly sexualized vision of womanhood. Normal women do not look and act like drag queens.
Well, like I said, normal women don't look and act like pantomime dames, but the whole point is that they are parodies. It's entertainment. It is performance.
The thing is, with a pantomime dame, we know that the pantomime dame has a strong theatrical tradition of being a man dressed up as a woman. It's known that the name of the male co-star is known. You know, you go and see whoever it is, I don't know, Christopher Biggins, for example, starring as Widow Clanky. With a drag queen, we don't know their real names. They are, I don't know, you know, Carla Divine or whatever it is they call themselves. They are not presenting themselves to children.
So in order for it to be acceptable, then, I mean, because to me that sounds like it would complicate things even further for children. So if the drag queen actually had a male name and it was almost like it was some sort of pantomime dame, then that would be okay. Whereas if they don't, then therefore it's too much of a parody for women. I mean, to me that complicates things even more. And I think for you to say that the fact that we know that it's Christopher Biggins makes it in some way easier for a child to perhaps be able to dissect it is rubbish, in my opinion.
No, because a pantomime dame is not dressing up as a very highly sexualised...
So every single drag queen, I mean, are you going to tell that not every drag queen is a highly sexualised or has a highly sexualised act? I mean, again, that to me... And I'm afraid to say it says more about your perceptions of what the LGBT community is and what drag queens are, rather than being based in fact. And I think you sort of seem to have this vision that there's going to be someone walking in a baskins and suspenders doing crude jokes and tequila shots with the children. And that's just not how things work.
In Bristol, the name of the drag queen going into Bristol Library is Miss Beaver. Okay. Now we all know what beaver is.
It's a lovely little furry animal.
No, come on. We all know that it's used as a crude euphemism. You know, and this is exactly what people are protesting about. That we've got, you know, this sexualised vision of women going into libraries. You know, what it is absolutely, you know, and that proves my point that, you know, you've got someone called Miss Beaver going to read stories to children. It is so unnecessary.
So presumably any adult joke that's in a pantomime that the adults will get that the children won't, like nice beaver, that would be something you would object to in that pantomime as vociferously.
I think it depends on the nature of the joke. I mean, you cannot actually generalise. But here, what we see is a very, as I've repeatedly said, it is a very sexualised version of women that's being presented. And I don't understand why children need to be presented to these very sexualised caricatures of women in order to learn that other people are different and to learn not to bully. You know?
Okay, I accept your side of things.
With what your previous caller, Caroline, was saying,
yep.
her perception as a woman of drag as being offensive towards women, I think is a very important point, and it's a point that she and another, you know, and quite a lot of women make about drag, is that they are, you know, it is a parody of being women. I've been sent a screen grab of something that was has been written about this. About these drag queens going into schools and speaking to the children. It says here, one of the drag queens refers to herself as Bristol's resident slag. And you know, we have someone who is performing this rather grotesque parody of womanhood, and these very, very negative, very, very, very patriarchal stereotypes of what women are. And they're presenting these to children. And I think, you know, to pick up on the point that you said, that when your nephews and your nieces know you as being someone who just has an ordinary life but happens to be a man who lives with a man, I think really that's the way to address homosexuality and say that, you know, there's nothing wrong with being gay. It's great that two people of the same sex can love each other and spend their lives together and share everything together.
And marry each other.
And marry each other. Well, yeah, I must admit, I don't think marriage is a particularly progressive thing, but if people want to get married, they should be allowed to get married.
I understand that, but I don't see why it would do a child any harm to see that in a context of a story being read and in a context of it being a non-sexualised, non-sexual, non-prurient performance, just as you would get, as we referenced before, at a pantomime, an absolutely ridiculous parody of a woman for comedic and entertainment purposes. And that is what drag is, essentially. Now, of course, it's a later night version. Sometimes it's a bit over a triple X rated version, just as Paul O'Grady was when he was Lily Savage on stage at the Vauxhall Tavern, and just how he wasn't like that when he was on stage as a pantomime dame, because, of course, anyone with intelligence will know that to children, it's a bit of dress up showing how different people act and dress in different ways. To adults, it's something very different.
Yeah, I get that, but children and adults are completely different things, and we are in an environment...
But they understand things on different levels as well, which is why adults laugh at different things in pantos to children. The children will be there for the story, read by someone who is in, essentially to them, a bit of fancy dress. That's about as harmful as that gets.
The point that I'm trying to make here, which, respectfully, you've cut over me twice, is that we have a situation at the moment where we have transgender advocacy groups going into schools and essentially telling children that because their interests and that are culturally coded masculine or feminine or culturally associated with boys or girls aren't the same as their sex, because girls want short hair or want to do metal work or do science and aren't interested in domestic whatever they call domestic science these days and whatnot. And they're saying we're in this situation at the moment where groups are going into schools and they are suggesting to children that because their personalities, because their interests don't match what we culturally code as being masculine or feminine or associated with males or females, that their bodies are wrong for their personalities, which to me is an utterly cruel thing to do with children.
Are they actually being told their bodies are wrong, or are they being advised that some people do find themselves identifying as a different gender to the sex that they were born in, and that actually for some people when they act differently they find that actually that they are in the wrong gender? Some people though just act a little bit differently, and actually whatever you might be, it's all absolutely fine. Because I guess I want to know from you, what is the big fear if a child is told at a young age that, that different genders exist and that some people might find themselves in the wrong gender and some people might not? What do you think will be the effect of that on a child being told that?
Okay, I'm going to answer a question with a question. What do you mean by gender? And what do you mean by having the wrong gender?
I guess what I mean is that if you are born of the male sex, or if you are born of the female sex, however the gender you identify as is male, then therefore you are in the wrong sex. You are the wrong gender for the sex in which you have been born. That's how I see that. However, obviously there is a debate as to which, by the way, I'm not completely against this debate as to how long it should be before someone actually transitions, how long it should be before that they are fully considered that new gender, if they do actually, that new sex rather, if they do actually transition. But yeah, that is how I see it, and I think that there is nothing wrong with a child, again, being told in the most basic and not the most detailed of terms, but in the most basic of terms, that some people find themselves wanting to be identify as a different gender, and you know what? There's nothing actually wrong with that. I really want to know from you what your biggest fear is about a child being told that.
I think it's terribly cruel to tell a child that because they prefer things that we as a society code as being things that a particular sex does, that we look at a child who is a girl who wants to wear trousers, climb trees, and fix cars and do stuff like that, because these are not considered to be traditionally.
But I'm not advocating for that. I'm simply advocating for them, because if that happens, I don't agree with that. But if a child is being told, and as I said, in the terms in which I just told you, hey, some people find that they are wanting to be in a different gender and live as a different gender, and some people find that they don't, and some people wear trousers who are girls, and some boys want to play with dolls, and you know what, whatever you are and whatever you want to be, it's all okay. What is your fear about a child being told about gender on that level?
My issue with this is not necessarily about the child being told about gender. It's the conflation of sex with gender. By all means, let people have whatever gender expression they want. Let young boys wear dresses and pretend to be princesses. Let girls play football and do science and whatever. But don't think or don't have this culture that we seem to have sleepwalked into, where we have this sort of behaviour as being coded that the child is born in the wrong body.
But what is your fear about children being like? I just really want to know. Do you think? I mean, I'll just ask you the question outright rather than trying to eke it out of you.
Sure.
Really, do you think? Do you have a fear? And is there a fear among some parents, which actually I kind of understand, but is there a fear that if you are to inform children about drag, about LGBT, rights, about different genders, all of these sorts of contentious issues, that if you were to inform a child of that in some way it might encourage or indeed affect the child turning into that particular thing. So if you tell children at too much of a young age about gay people existing, they might become gay. If you tell children at too much of a young age that gender can be quite fluid, that actually that might cause them to question their gender.
I think you need to understand that these cultural factors, these things, they just don't exist in a vacuum, and we have a problem at the moment in this country. That last year there were more than 2,000 young girls referred to the Tavistock and Portland Clinic, the Gender Identity Clinic, which is the UK's central gender identity clinic for dealing with children who have such problems. If you go back 10 years, the number of girls that were being referred to these clinics were insignificant, and the number of girls being referred was very, very small compared to the number of boys that were being referred.
You could say something quite similar about gay people as well, though, Miranda.
No, it's a completely different thing. Never in the history of homosexuality have gay people obtained rights by asking to be called heterosexuals, and being a homosexual doesn't involve taking body altering drugs or undertaking surgery.
No. The comparison I was making was the fact that there would probably be the same argument that could be given towards gay people not being so prevalent before gay rights and before gay equality was on the agenda, and that a lot of people might say, well, hang on, that's created more gay people because there are more gay people nowadays. The counter argument to that would be, no, there were always these people who were gay, or there were always these people that perhaps had issues deep down with their gender. It's only now that they feel that they are able to articulate it and that those resources are there to actually help them. It doesn't mean that there are more people, it's just that there are more people admitting to it.
It's blindingly obvious that with the types of cultures that we had around gay people, prior to 1967, pretty much most people knew who the high-profile homosexuals were, apart from the ones, obviously, who kept themselves in the closet and then were outed by the press. But, it was open knowledge that people like Charles Hawtrey and Frankie Howard were homosexual men in the public eye. And, of course, these men were unable to live their lives and participate, and fully participate in public life with their relationship the way that it is because of the way that the legislation was drafted. In respect of what you're talking about with gender, again, there has been a massive cultural change. What we used to have a comparatively small number of transsexuals who would go through a medical process and transition and, would attempt to live as the opposite sex, whatever that may mean. but there was always a subculture of what we would loosely describe as being transvestites and cross-dressers. What you see now is that the transvestites and cross-dressers have completely disappeared, except that they haven't. What has actually happened here is that what we know as transvestites and cross-dressers all form part of this elongated, huge transgender umbrella, and under this umbrella, it's become normalised for people to buy off-market hormones, off the internet from some. Well,
again, if that's illegal, I wouldn't be in favour of that. I think we're going to have to agree to disagree. But all I'll say in response to the normalisation that you're worried about of gender fluidity is that at least those people who are transvestite, or at least those people who are of different genders or who are going through transitions as they would have years ago, at least they're not committing suicide anymore, because the suicide rate among people who are trans or who identify as transvestite is absolutely through the roof. And now hopefully they're getting the sort of recognition and rights they deserve. But I do appreciate that it is a grey area, Miranda, and I do actually appreciate that there are issues that are very, very difficult to solve regarding women feeling safe in their own safe spaces with men who identify as women. I actually understand that concern.